أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد نبيه وآله وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على آل محمد. اللهم لك الحمد على ما جرى به قضاؤك في أوليائك الذين استخلصتهم لنفسك ودينك، إذ اخترت لهم جزيل ما عندك من النعيم المقيم الذي لا زوال له ولا اضمحلال، بعد أن شرعت عليهم الزهد في درجات هذه الدنيا الدنية وزخرفها وزبرجها، فشرطوا لك ذلك وعلمت منهم الوفاء به فقبلتهم وقربتهم وقدمت لهم الذكر العلية والثناء الجلية، وأحببت عليهم ملائكتك وكرمتهم بوحيك ورفدتهم بعلمك وجعلتهم الذرية إليك والوسيلة إلى رضوانك، فبعثوا أسكنته جنتك إلى أن أخرجته منها، وبعثوا حملته في فلكك ونجيته ومن آمن معه من الهلكة برحمتك، وبعث اتخذته لنفسك خليلا وسألك لسان صدق في الآخرين فأجبته وجعلت ذلك عليا، وبعث كلمته من شجرة تكليما وجعلت له من أخيه ردءا ووزيرا، وبعث أولدته من غير آب وآتيته البينات وأيدته بروح القدس، وكل شرعت له شريعة ونهجت له منهاج وتخيرت له أوصياء، مستعفزا بعد مستعفز من مدة إلى مدة، إقامة لدينك وحجة على عبادك، ولئلا يزول الحق عن مقره ويغلب الباطل على أهله، ولا يقول أحد لولا أرسلت إلينا رسولا منذرا وأقمت لنا علما هاديا فنتبع آياتك من قبل أن نذل ونخزى، إلى أن انتهيت بالأمر إلى حبيبك ونجيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وآله، فكان كمن تجبته سيد من خلقته وصفوة من استفيت وأفزل من اجتبيت وأكرم من اعتمدت، قدمته على أنبيائك وبعثته إلى الثقلين من عبادك، وأوتأته مشاركك ومغاربك وسخرت له البراق وعرجت بروحه إلى سمائك وأودعته علم ما كان وما يكون إلى انقضاء خلقك، ثم نصرته بالروم وحففته بجبرائيل وميكائيل والمسومين من ملائكتك، ووعدته أن تظهر دينه على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون، وذلك بعد أن بوأته مبوع صدق من أهله وجعلت له ولهم أول بيت وزع للناس الذي ببكة مباركا وهدى للعالمين، فيه آيات بينات مقام إبراهيم ومن دخله كان آمنا، وقلت إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم جعلت أجر محمد صلواتك عليه وآله مودتهم في كتابك، فقلت قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى، وقلت ما سألتكم من أجر فهو لكم، وقلت ما أسألكم عليه من أجر إلا من شاء يتخذ إلى ربه سبيلا، فكانوا هم السبيل إليك والمسلك إلى رضوانك، فلما انكزت أيامه أقام وليه ولي ابن أبي طالب صلواتك عليهما وآلهما حاديا، إذ قال هو المنذر ولكل قوم أحد، فقال والملأ أمامه من كنت مولاه فعلي مولاه، اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه وانصر من نصر واخذل من خذله، وقال من كنت أنا نبيه فعلي أميره، وقال أنا وعلي من شجرة واحدة وسائر الناس من شجر شتى، وأحله محل هارون من موسى، فقال له أنت مني بمنزلة هارون من موسى إلا أنه لا نبي بعدي، وزوجه ابنته سيدة نساء العالمين، وأحل له من مسجده ما حل له وسد الأبواب إلا بابا، ثم أودعه علمه وحكمته، فقال أنا مدينة العلم وحكمته، فقال أنا مدينة العلم وعلي بابها، فمن أراد المدينة والحكمة فلياتها من بابها، ثم قال أنت أخي ووسي ووارثي، لحمك من لحمي ودمك من دمي وسلمك سلمي وحربك حربي، والإيمان مخالط لحمك ودمك كما خالت لحمي ودمي، وأنت غدا على الحوز خليفتي، وأنت تقضي ديني وتنجز عداتي، وشيتك على منابر من نور مبيزة وجوههم حولي في الجنة وهم جيراني، ولولا أنت يا علي لم يعرف المؤمنون بعدي، وكان بعده هدى من الضلال ونورا من العمى، وحبل الله المتين وصراطه المستقيم، لا يسبق بقرابة في رحيم ولا بسابقة في دين، ولا يلحق في منقبة من مناقب يحذف حذو الرسول صلى الله عليهما وآلهما، ويقاتل على التعويل ولا تأخذه في الله لومة لائم، قد وترى فيه صناديد العرب وقتل أبطالهم وناوش ذؤبانهم، فأودع قلوبهم أحقادا بدرية وخيبرية وحنينية وغيرهن، فأزبت على عداوته وأقبت على منابزته، حتى قتل الناكثين والقاسطين والمارقين، ولما قزى نحبه وقتله أشقى الآخرين يتبع أشقى الأولين، لم يمتثل أمر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله في الحادين بعد الحادين، والأمة مسرة على مقته مجتمعة على قطيعة رحيمه وإقصاء ولده، إلا القليل ممن وفى لرعاية الحق فيهم، فقتل من قتل وسبي من سبي وأقصي من أقصي، وجرى القضاء لهم بما يرجى له حسن المثوبة، وإذ قانت الأرض لله يورثها من يشاء من عباده والعاقبة للمتقين، وسبحان ربنا إن كان وعد ربنا لمفعولا، ولن يخلف الله وعده وهو العزيز الحكيم، فعلى العتائب من أهل بيت محمد وعلي صلى الله عليهما وآلهما فليبكي الباكون، وإياهم فليندب النادبون، ولمثلهم فلتذرف الدموع، وليصرخ الصارخون ويزج الزاجون ويعج العاجون. أين الحسن أين الحسين أين أبناء الحسين؟ صالح بعد صالح وصادق بعد صادق. أين السبيل بعد السبيل؟ أين الخيرة بعد الخيرة؟ أين الشموس الطالعة؟ أين الأقمار المنيرة؟ أين الأنجم الظاهرة؟ أين أعلام الدين وقواعد العلم؟ أين بقية الله التي لا تخلو من العترة الحادية؟ أين المعد لقطع دابر الظلمة؟ أين المنتظر لإقامة الأمت والعوج؟ أين المرتجى لإزالة الجور والعدوان؟ أين المدخر لتجديد الفرائض والسنن؟ أين المتخير لإعادة الملة والشريعة؟ أين المؤمل لإحياء الكتاب وحدوده؟ أين محيي معالم الدين وأهله؟ أين قاسم شوكة المعتدين؟ أين حادم أبنية الشرك والنفاق؟ أين مبيد أهل الفسوق والعصيان والطغيان؟ أين حاسد فروع الغي والشقاق؟ أين تامس آثار الزيغ والأهواء؟ أين قاطئ حبائل الكذب والافتراء؟ أين مبيد العتاة والمردة؟ أين مستأصل أهل العناد والتضليل والإلحاد؟ أين معز الأولياء ومذل الأعداء؟ أين جامع الكلمة على التقوى؟ أين باب الله الذي منه يؤتى؟ أين وجه الله الذي إليه يتوجه الأولياء؟ أين السبب المتصل بين الأرض والسماء؟ أين صاحب يوم الفتح وناشر راية الهدى؟ أين مؤلف شمل الصلاح والرضا؟ أين الطالب بذهول الأنبياء وأبناء الأنبياء؟ أين الطالب بدم المقتول بكربلاء؟ أين المنصور على من اعتدى عليه وافترى؟ أين المستر الذي يجاب إذا دعا؟ أين صدر الخلائق ذو البر والتقوى؟ أين ابن النبي المصطفى وابن علي المرتضى وابن خديجة الغراء وابن فاطمة الكبرى؟ بأبي أنت وأمي ونفسي لك الوقاء والحمى. يا ابن السادة المقربين، يا ابن النجباء الأكرمين، يا ابن الحداة المهديين، يا ابن الخيرة المحذبين، يا ابن الغطارفة الأنجبين، يا ابن الأطائب المطهرين، يا ابن الخزارمة المنتجبين، يا ابن القماقمة الأكرمين، يا ابن البدور المنيرة، يا ابن السرج المزيئة، يا ابن الشهب الثاقبة، يا ابن الأنجم الزاهرة، يا ابن السبل الوازحة، يا ابن الأعلام اللائحة، يا ابن العلوم الكاملة، يا ابن السنن المشهورة، يا ابن المعالم المأثورة، يا ابن المعجزات الموجودة، يا ابن الدلائل المشهودة، يا ابن الصراط المستقيم، يا ابن النبأ العظيم، يا ابن من هو في أم الكتاب لدى الله علي حكيم، يا ابن الآيات والبينات، يا ابن الدلائل الظاهرات، يا ابن البراهين الواضحات الباهرات، يا ابن الحجج البالغات، يا ابن النعم السابغات، يا ابن طه والمحكمات، يا ابن ياسين والذاريات، يا ابن الطور والعاديات، يا ابن من دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى، دنوا واقترابا من العلي الأعلى. ليت الشعر أين استقرت بك النوى، بل أي أرض تكلك أوثرا. أبرضوا غيرها أم ذيتها عزيز علي أن أرى الخلق ولا ترى ولا أسمع لك حسيسا ولا نجوى عزيز علي أن تهيت بك دوني البلوى ولا ينالك مني زجيج ولا شكوى بنفسي أنت من مغيب لم يخلو منا بنفسي أنت من لازه ما نزه عنا بنفسي أنت أمنية الشائك يتمنى من مؤمن ومؤمنة ذكر فحنا بنفسي أنت من أقيد عز لا يسامى بنفسي أنت من أثيل مجد لا يجار بنفسي أنت من تلاد نعم لا تزاهى بنفسي أنت من نسيف شرف لا يساوى إلى متى أحار فيك يا مولا وإلى متى وأي خطاب نصف فيك وأي نجوى عزيز علي أن أجاب دونك وأناغ عزيز علي أن أبقيك ويخذلك الورى عزيز علي أن يجري عليك دونهم ما جرى هل من معين فأوتيل معه العويل والبقاء هل من جزوع فأساعد جزعه إذا خلا هل قزيت عين فساعدتها عيني على القذى هل إليك يا ابن أحمد سبيل فتلك هل يتصل يومنا منك بعدتي فنحزى متى نرد مناهلك الربية فنروى متى ننتقع من عزب مائك فقد طال الصدى متى نغاديك ونرابيهك فنقر عينا متى ترانا ونراك وقد نشرت لواء النصر ترى أترانا نهف بك وأنت تعم الملا وقد ملأت الأرض عدلا وأزقت أعداءك هوانا وإقابة وأبرت الأتاة وجهدت الحق وقطعت دابر المتقبرين واجتثثت وصول الظالمين ونحن نقول الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم أنت كشاف القرب والبلوى وإليك أستأذي فعندك العدوى وأنت رب الآخرة والدنيا فأغيث يا غياث المستغيثين عبيدك المبتلى وعره سيده يا شديد القوى وأزلنه به العسى والجوى وبرد غليله يا من على العرش استوى ومن إليه رجعى والمنتهى اللهم ونحن عبيدك الطائقون إلى وليك المذكر بك وبنبيك خلقته لنا إسمة وملاذا وأقمته لنا قواما ومعاذا وجعلته للمؤمنين منا إماما فبلغه منا تحية وسلاما وزدنا بذلك يا ربي إكراما واجعل مستقره لنا مستقرا ومقاما وأتمم نعمتك بتقديمك إياه أمامنا حتى توردنا جنانك ومرافقة الشهداء من خلصائك اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على محمد جده ورسولك السيد الأكبر وعلى أبي سيد الأصغر وجدته الصديقة الكبرى فاطمة بنت محمد وعلى من استفيت من آبائه البررة وعليه أفضل وأكمل وأتم وأدوم وأكثر وأوفر ما صليت على أحد من أصفيائك وخيرتك من خلقك وصل عليه صلاة لا غاية لعددها ولا نهاية لمددها ولا نفاد لعمدها اللهم واقم به الحق وأدهز به الباطل وأدل به أولياءك وأذلل به أعداءك وصل اللهم بيننا وبينه وصلة تؤدي إلى مرافقة سلفي واجعلنا ممن يأخذ بحجزتهم ويمكث في ظلهم، وإنا على تعدية حقوقه إليه والاجتهاد في طاعته واجتناب معصيته، ومن علينا برزاه، وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته ودعاءه وخيره ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك، واجعل صلاتنا به مقبولة وذنوبنا به مغفورة ودعاءنا به مستجابة، واجعل أرزاقنا به مبسوطة وهمومنا به مخفية وهوائجنا به مقضية، وأقبل إلينا بوجهك الكريم واقبل تقربنا إليك، وانظر إلينا نظرة رحيمة نستقبل بها الكرامة عندك، ثم لا تصرفها عنا بجودك، واسقنا من حوض جده صلى الله عليه وآله بكاسه وبيده ريا ربيا حنيا صائغا لا زما بعده يا أرحم الراحمين.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله انتجبه لولايته واختصه برسالته وأكرمه بالنبوة وأشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأمينه في أرضه وحجته على عباده اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله أوصيكم عباد الله وإياي بتقوى الله. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I take this opportunity to remind myself of the importance of taqwa and of course share the same advice with you. Taqwa, which has been reverberated throughout the Holy Quran, is a formula of success within dunya as well as in akhirah. And taqwa is when a person has spiritually heightened himself, where he can realize the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even in the most private of his own life, or in the most private of his moments. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatih. O you who believe, have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Recognize that He is everywhere and He monitors your actions. Fear Him the way He ought to be feared. Be cautious of Him. Be aware of His presence the way He ought to be remembered. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. And do not depart from this world except that you are in the state of absolute submission, that you have submitted your life purely for the religion of Islam. Elsewhere in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. O you who believe, be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear Him, and of course be amongst those who are the representatives of truth. Be amongst those who are the truthful ones. And of course when you refer to the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the Ahlul Bayt themselves have testified that we are the Sadiqeen, we are the embodiment of truth. That when a person is unable to see the truth in his life, is drowning in an ocean of ambiguity, then he should look towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. The Ahlul Bayt will then be able to guide them, give them information that they will not find elsewhere, and they can use that information, prioritize their lives, give purpose to their lives, and move on in their lives. And it's very important because we find many narrations from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that if a person moves away from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, then they will access information that is false. They will have access to plenty of information, plenty of knowledge, which is not in line with the reality. Imam Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam famously mentions and narrates, he says that you will not find knowledge that emanates, you will not find knowledge that is true, that corresponds to the reality, except the knowledge that comes from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And unfortunately you find that we live in a world where it's very, very easy, it's very simple for a person to be duped into believing something that is simply not true. When knowledge, specifically when knowledge and information is falsely disguised as good and as the truth, you'll find that many people tend to believe in information that is that does not correspond with the true reality. And this is, of course, a powerful tactic that has been employed by many, many people, by many parties throughout the centuries. When you look at, for example, in politics, political parties have used misinformation, have used nowadays social media, but in those days, for example, many centuries ago, they would use lectures, they would use, for example, articles, they would use private gatherings as a method, as a means to spread false information. And these were specifically tactics that were used by individuals to change the majority's opinion. So imagine a scenario where you have a political party, that has been given support by the people, but then you have the opposing party that uses misinformation, that uses false knowledge to create a sense of disapproval by the public towards the active political party. In the fields of politics, we have this problem where two political parties will try and spread misinformation against the other to waver the public's opinion and acceptance towards whatever political party. Then you have, for example, within our organizations, as small as they are, you'll find, for example, people spreading misinformation about others in the community to waver or to change the perception, to change the opinions that people hold about other people. When you look, for example, towards academia, likewise, you'll have many people who use false information to try and change the people's opinions on certain matters or certain issues. Nowadays, you'll have people coming forward very clearly on social media, warning the public, warning the masses to not follow and listen to everything that is available online. When information is available online, and it's very, very, very simple to publish one's opinions online, it may not correspond to the truth. So you'll have, for example, scientists, you'll have, for example, scholars trying to fight a deluge, a tsunami of misinformation that exists online. So just as how we have the battle between truth and falsehood, between truth and misinformation, in many different walks of life, in many different areas of life, you'll find that we face the same problem when it comes to religion as well. Within Iman and Kufr, it's no different. It's very easy for a person to believe in something that is not in line with the madhab of the Ahl al-Bayt, and in turn digress away from the truth for whatever reason. And one of these reasons is that when a person is bombarded with misinformation, when you utter something over and over and over again, when it's published in many different articles, when it's an opinion that has been adopted by many different scholars for whatever reason throughout the centuries, when it's published in many different books, all of a sudden you find people tend to believe in it. But when you dig deeper into that reality, you realize that, hold on a second, what they believed in does not make sense. It's very inconsistent. So let me give you an example. At the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, the people were very skeptical with regards to the announcement of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam as the new caliph after the Prophet. Many disapproved because Imam Ali alayhi salam was single-handedly responsible for the deaths of their elders. Imam Ali alayhi salam was responsible for the death of their family members, especially in Uhud, especially in the Battle of Badr, and so on and so forth. To the extent that there are many today who challenge the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam and believe that, and they believe wholeheartedly that the wilayah belongs to others other than Imam Ali alayhi salam. And why is that? It is because this misinformation was adopted by many scholars throughout the centuries. But when you study the whole concept of wilayah, when you study the whole concept of what happened in Ghadir Qum, what happened after the death of the Holy Prophet of Islam, you realize that there are many inconsistencies that took place. All that is required is for a person to invest some of his time researching into certain historical events that took place. So there was a movement, there was a wave of a movement which attracted the hearts of the people over the decades, and that was through spreading false information. Many false ideologies and beliefs and practical approaches to Islam crept into the religion of Islam, especially during the time of the A'immat al-Athar. So during the 4th Imam, during the 5th Imam, 6th Imam, 7th Imam, many different aqaidi issues now came towards the religion of Islam. Many fiqhi perspectives of Islam changed and it was quite alien towards Islam, but then because many began to adopt it, It became part and parcel within the religion of Islam. The A'immat al-Athar, when you read their biographies, they fought back vehemently. They fought back savagely, because for them an attack on Islam was not acceptable. It was not an option for them to just sit back and let many ideologies, many practical approaches to Islam being changed. They could have been persecuted, they were abused, but none of that mattered. What mattered to them was to preserve the true message of the religion of Islam. Now, as hard as it is for me to say this, it's very easy for us as normal human beings to sway away from the truth, to move away from the truth. As knowledgeable or as much knowledgeable as we are, we still holistically lack knowledge with regards to the religion of Islam. What we know are the basics, the fundamentals of Islam, compared to scholars who have dedicated decades of their lives studying the religion of Islam. And it's very hard for us to swallow this and to admit to this undeniable fact. When you look at a lawyer spends decades training to become the best in his field. Likewise a dentist, likewise a pharmacist. Likewise a chemist who has, for example, many different academia experience under his belt. He may have a PhD in chemistry. It's because he's struggled to reach that particular maqam. Islam is the same. It is a science as well. And when I say this, it's blasphemous and borderline arrogant for a person to say, look, I'm not an expert, I'm not a scholar in the religion of Islam, but I also have the skills to recognize the truth from falsehood. When that's simply not the case. When a scholar, for example, a mountebanker as is known, will introduce, for example, a new concept within the religion of Islam. A normal person wearing the clothes of a scholar, disguised as a scholar, will present a new concept within the religion of Islam. And he will use language, he will use logic, and he will interpret a hadith in ways, in a stylish manner that appeases to the people. That makes sense to the people. A layman who is simply untrained, looking at a riwayah, looking at how to observe or how to approach a particular narration, who lacks knowledge to determine the difference between what such a person is saying, a person who has disguised himself with the clothing of a scholar, and what a genuine scholar is saying. A lame person may not realize the difference between these two individuals. If you take, for example, a person who has a PhD in chemistry and a person who has a PhD in physics, both fields, chemistry and physics, are so different from one another that if one was to attend the lecture of a different, he would have no idea what is being spoken of. A PhD chemist attending the lectures of a PhD physicist will not be able to understand the language that is being used, because these are two different, totally different fields. And so a PhD chemist will, he will testify and he will say, or he will agree with the opinions of a PhD physicist, especially if that is his specific field, and likewise vice versa. It's borderline arrogant for us to come forward and say, I have not trained myself in the religion of Islam to study a hadith, to study the Quran, yet I can attain and I can determine truth from falsehood. A layman, as I said, is simply untrained and is not capable of understanding truth from falsehood, especially when you have a scholar or a person disguised as a scholar, using the language of a scholar, changing certain ideologies, adding certain, you would say, for example, changes within the religion of Islam. And this is because we're not trained in this field. It causes confusion. And that is a limitation on our behalf. It creates a veil and a barrier for ourselves, and we're simply not capable of recognizing truth from falsehood. When you look at, for example, outside of the religion of Islam, the new atheistic movement, you have many publications that have crept up over the past decade or so. One of them very famously being the God Delusion. Then you have another that goes by the title of A Universe from Nothing, and so on and so forth. What these scholars of these books or these authors have done is that they have capitalized, using the ignorance of the people, present arguments which simply are fallacious, that don't make sense at all, to prove that there is no God in this world. And the audacity that these scholars have, or these authors have, to say, let's translate these books into Persian, let's translate these books into Arabic, and we'll show the Islamic tradition how false they are, that they believe in a God. Whereas when you look at the Islamic sciences and their approach towards such publications, they have written articles, they have written rebuttals, they have written books, rad, as a refutation towards these publications, the God delusion specifically being one of them, looking at every argument that is presented in this book, explaining to the reader why it is a fallacious argument, why it is a false argument. But the point here is, people are not able to distinguish truth from falsehood. So when you have a random person who approaches himself as a scholar, or a person disguised in the attire of a scholar, the layman is simply not able to understand or distinguish truth from falsehood because of his limitation, because of the barriers and the veils that exist within us, not able to understand, not able to recognize truth from falsehood. Over the past few years, for example, Ziyarat al-Arba'in has been scrutinized. Ziyarat al-Arba'in has been questioned. And you had scholars, you had dhakirin, you have, for example, muballighins who stood up and defended the whole process and the whole movement of Ziyarat al-Arba'in. Ayat al-Sistani very recently was asked a question. Hafadhahullah, may Allah prolong his life. And the question was, Samahatkum, what's your opinion with regards to Ziyarat al-Arba'in? There are many who are coming forward saying that it is a ziyarah that has no credence, that has no credibility at all. And if it does, if there are riwayats that prove that Ziyarat al-Arba'in is something, then at least we can say for sure, for certainty, that it's da'if, that it's weak. It's not something that we can build upon, let alone create an entire movement out of. The movement that we see, for example, today, where millions march or millions walk from Najaf to Karbala, or even from the cities of Basra and so on and so forth. An interesting answer was given in reply. And this answer is beautiful because it's a simple, straightforward answer. It reinforces the hearts of those who believe in Marja'iyah, who believe in his knowledge specifically and his leadership capacities, but then at the other side, on the other hand, it infuriates the hearts of others. His answer was very simple. He says, لا يصغى إلى ما ينقل بهذا الشأن. He says, you don't have to listen to people who question Ziyarat al-Arba'in, specifically in this particular affair. He says, you don't have to listen to them. There are many people who question, for example, certain ideologies, certain movements. It's not something new. It's something that has existed for many centuries before. And when they regurgitate their own opinions, you don't have to listen to it, especially when it contradicts the opinions of the majority. We've seen many times throughout centuries where ulama have taken an isolated opinion, have magnified it to create change within the Islamic madhab, within the Islamic religion. An isolated opinion was challenged when it came about, it was disproved, and it was simply, people think that it's a revolutionary idea when it's not. Centuries ago, scholars had the same isolated opinions, and they were rejected by the contemporaneous scholars of their time. Heated debates took place, they were challenged, and they were simply refuted. Now, having said all of this, of how difficult it is for us to determine haqq from batil, we realize that guidance ultimately comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Guidance ultimately comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The very interesting introduction to the khutbah, what do we say? We say, May yahdi Allahu fala mudilla lah, the one whom Allah guides, there is no dhalal for this person. This person will never move away from the religion of Islam. وَمَن يُضْلِلْ فَلَا هَادِيَ لَهُ. But when a person has absolutely no interest in being guided, he has no intentions in seeking the truth, this person actively through his intentions, through his actions, does not care about finding the truth, searching the truth, or finding purpose in his life, فَلَا هَادِيَ لَهُ. There will be no guidance for him at all. Guidance ultimately comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at times, many a times, we feel that we are drowning in an ocean of ambiguity. We're surrounded by darkness. We're surrounded by dhalal. And we may feel that we're being pushed away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when a person connects with Allah, when a person performs dua to Allah, Ya Allah, increase my intellect. Ya Allah, show me the truth. Ya Allah, allow me to seek guidance. Rather than praying for wealth, rather than praying for all of these dunyawi aspects, we should often try and focus on our spiritual and intellectual needs as well. You find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see that this servant of his has the right intentions to find the truth. Let's give him the truth. And this person will find the truth. And we see this quite clearly, especially in this day and age. We'll see, for example, individuals coming from staunch racist backgrounds coming towards the religion of Islam. It is because ultimately deep down they had the intention of finding the truth. Very interesting verse of the Holy Quran. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. Ya Allah, do not make our hearts move away from you after you have guided us. It's a very beautiful verse because what it does is it gives us an understanding that those who have true knowledge, that those who have yaqeen in their hearts, they are never immune from deviation. They are never immune from moving away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to help them. So amongst the opinions given by scholars with regards to this particular verse, there were 4 opinions given here specifically. When a person believes that his lutf, that Allah's grace will be taken away from them, first they turn to Allah with sincere intentions. Ya Allah, guide us. Allah gave them lutf, Allah gave them grace, Allah guided them. Now these people are turning to Allah saying, Ya Allah, we thank you that you have guided us, but do not remove or do not take away this grace that you have given us. Number 2, they say, Ya Allah, you have given me guidance. I can see the truth and I've submitted to the truth. Please do not, and I beg of you, Ya Allah, do not make me face certain difficulties that move me away from you. Test me, but do not test me in areas that would move me away from you. Number 3, Ya Allah, there are several problems in my life and I seek your mercy. When you choose to block some of your mercy from me, do not make my heart despair of your mercy. There are many sins that I perform. I believe in the truth. I believe, for example, the madhab, in the wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. But at the same time, I'm a sinner. The sins that I commit, Ya Allah, do not let these sins move me away from you or lose hope in your mercy. And number 4, Ya Allah, do not let our hearts move away from you, especially when we're in the state of conviction and tranquility. A beautiful question is then raised. How does a person move away from Allah? A person who has been given guidance, who has been given hidayah, how does he move away from Allah? 3 things and I'll end. Number 1, when a person becomes proud, when a person becomes self-absorbed. This superiority complex that makes a person believe that he is better than all. It leads to spiritual stagnation. He doesn't move closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He becomes blinded to his own faults. And number 3, he considers everyone around him to be inferior. When a person becomes proud of himself, this self-admiration that goes on in his heart, you find that it is absolutely condemned by the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam famously says that whenever ujub penetrates the heart of the human being, the soul is destined to be destroyed. So that's number 1, when a person becomes proud of himself, simply because hidayah is given to him. Number 2, it's when a person falls prey to the waswas al-shaytan, when a person falls prey to the whispers of shaytan. Shaytan tempts him. Shaytan doesn't misguide us by taking us by our hands and moving us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shaytan, to a believer specifically, he begins to cloud his perspective. He begins to place doubts in his mind. He begins to make certain a'mal, certain rituals, certain, for example, daily rituals like salah, very, very difficult for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, Shaitan is your enemy. Take him as an enemy. Seek protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against the evil and the accursed Shaitan. Because Shaitan, all he does, his only mission, لَأَغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ, I will most definitely misguide as many from humanity as possible. So number 2 is through waswas shaitan that a person moves away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number 3, when a person follows his own personal desires. When a person performs or when a person succumbs to his own personal desires. Famously, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam encourages his followers to adapt self-discipline in their lives. The inner desires which can overcome and overpower the intelligence. It's very interesting because the intellect of the human being is hujjatul batinah. It is the hujjah which has been programmed within each and every one of us. It is supposed to lead us. It is supposed to guide us. It is an imam, an innate imam for us. But our personal desires sometimes can overpower that innate imam. And it can misguide us. It can move us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from misinformation. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us safeguarded against all of the false information that exists out there, especially when it comes to the religion of Islam. Especially when it comes to matters of our faith, matters of our aqeedah, matters of our even practical approaches to the religion of Islam. And we do so by establishing a connection with the A'immat al-Athhar, with the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. They teach us the true understanding of imamah. They teach us the true understanding of nubuwwah. They in turn teach us the true understanding of tawheed. وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
أيها السراج المنير، السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا وصي رسول رب العالمين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك أيها المدفون بأرض البقيع ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين والمؤمنات، السلام عليك وعلى جدك وعلى جدتك وأبيك، السلام عليك وعلى أمك وأخيك، السلام عليك وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك وبنيك، السلام عليكم شهداء كربلاء وأسراء كربلاء، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين وعليين وعون محمد وقاسم بن الحسن ومسلم بن عقيل وهاني بن عروة وحبيب بن المظاهر والحر الشهيد الرياحي، السلام عليكم شهداء كربلاء وأسراء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء إمامنا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء، السلام عليك وعلى آبائك 7 وعلى أبنائك 4 وعلى أختك فاطمة المعصومة ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا حجة الله في أرضه، السلام عليك يا عين الله في خلقه، السلام عليك يا نور الله الذي يهتدي به المهتدون ويفرج به عن المؤمنين، السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف، السلام عليك أيها الولي الناصح، السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة، السلام عليك يا عين الحياة، السلام عليك صلى الله عليك وآل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين، السلام عليك عجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر، السلام عليك يا مولاي، أنا مولاك عارف بأولاك وأخراك، أتقرب إلى الله تعالى بك وبآل بيتك، وأنتظر ظهورك وظهور الحق على يديك، وأسأل الله أن يصلي على محمد وآل محمد، وأن يجعلني من المنتظرين لك والتابعين والناصرين لك على أعدائك والمستشهدين بين يديك في جملة أوليائك يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان، صلوات الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك. هذا يوم الجمعة، وهو يومك المتوقع فيه ظهورك والفرج فيه للمؤمنين على يديك، وقتل الكافرين بسيفك، وأنا يا مولاي فيه ضيفك وجارك، وأنت يا مولاي كريم من أولاد الكرام ومأمور بالضيافة والإجارة، فأضفني وأجرني، صلوات الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك الطاهرين. اللهم صل على